You've tuned in to Larger Than Life with Pastor Ron Hint of Calvary Chapel, Houston. Here's a preview from Pastor Ron of today's message.
We were pretty much in a deep pit in the miry clay. And David, in one of the Psalms, uses that analogy. Isn't that interesting? In Psalm 40 and verse 2, he says, God brought me up out of the horrible pit, out of the miry clay. He set my feet upon a rock. He has established my steps, and he put a new song in my heart. And I think that's exactly what Jesus Christ has done for all of us. I would say this, though, even though we're saved, there are times where we feel like it's the pits, though, right?
Have you ever stopped to remember where you were when Jesus saved you? Part of salvation is knowing that Jesus came to save us when we were at our lowest. We may have been doing fine in life by worldly standards, but we were dead spiritually. In today's message, Pastor Ron will be reminding us of how spiritually lost we were before Jesus came into our lives. He came to transform our lives and to give us life abundantly. Even when times get tough, we can rest easy knowing that His love will never fail. Well, let's join Pastor Ron in the book of Jeremiah chapter 37 with today's edition of Larger Than Life.
So Jeremiah took another scroll, gave it to Baruch the scribe. He wrote out the instruction of Jeremiah, the words that were in the book before that were burned with fire. And besides that, there were added to them many other words. So obviously there were more chapters to write. And of course, we have the book of Jeremiah before us today. Now we come to chapter 37, and here we're now under the final king of Judah, King Zedekiah. And Nebuchadnezzar, though, notice it says, made him king in the land of Judah. So here he was placed here really as a puppet, a vassal. All he had to do was submit to Babylon, and the city would remain. They would be allowed to worship in the temple if they chose. Of course, they were worshiping other gods as well. And as long as Zedekiah kept order and remained loyal to the king of Babylon, he would live. But the problem is, neither his nor his servants nor his people of the land gave heed to the words of the Lord, which he had spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. God had actually told Jeremiah to tell him, listen, submit to Babylon, submit to their rulership. Take your punishment and you will live. But if you don't, this whole place will be destroyed. You're still going to be punished. It'll be worse, and I'll carry you away to Babylon. But he wouldn't listen. Which, by the way, makes verse 3 kind of strange. Because Zedekiah, the king, sent to Jeucal and Zephaniah the priest to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, would you pray now to the Lord our God for us? Which is so strange. I mean, he has been against Jeremiah from the very beginning, and even more so, we'll see that. But he kind of wanted Jeremiah to pray for him. He kind of wanted the perks of having, a prophet there pray to God, but he didn't want to obey God. He's like, those people who go to church every once in a while. I don't know, for whatever reason. They want to hear a message, maybe it makes them feel good, but they have no intention of living it out. So moving on in verse 4, Jeremiah was coming and going among the people, but he had not yet put him in prison. So he eventually will put him in prison, but at this point he was free. And at this time, Pharaoh's army came up from Egypt. And when the Chaldeans who were besieging Jerusalem heard the news of them, they departed from Jerusalem. So we know from history and other passages as well that Zedekiah had actually hired Egypt to come and help them. They paid tribute to help us, and it did frighten off the Babylonians for a while. They pulled away. But the word of the Lord comes to Jeremiah again and says in verse 7, thus says the Lord God of Israel, thus you shall say to the king of Judah, who sent you to me to inquire of me, behold, Pharaoh's army, which has come to help you, will return to Egypt, to their own land. And the Chaldeans shall come back and fight against this city and take it and burn it with fire. Now, if you remember back in chapter 28, there was a false prophet by the name of Hananiah. If you remember that passage, Jeremiah was told to put a wooden yoke on his neck and say, submit to the Babylonians. You will go into captivity. Submit to them. And it was Hananiah that took the wooden yoke off his neck and broke it through the ground. We're not going to go into captivity. We're going to have victory. And God then said to him through Jeremiah, you've now made those yokes iron. They were wood. You've made them iron. It's going to happen. So they were seeking to get around it, but they refused. So Jeremiah says in verse 9, do not deceive yourselves, saying, the Chaldeans will surely depart from us. They're not going to depart. For though you had defeated the whole army of the Chaldeans who fight against you. Let's say they were here and you were able to defeat them. and there remained only a few wounded men among them, they would rise up every man to his tent and burn the city with fire. If only a few remaining, I'd raise up their bodies and burn this thing down. You're as good as gone, man. God declared their defeat. And it happened when the army of the Chaldeans left the siege of Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army, that Jeremiah went out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to claim his property there among the people. So there was a short reprieve when the Egyptians came. Eventually the Chaldeans came back, they defeated the Egyptians, and then they besieged Jerusalem. But in this little quiet wake of war, Jeremiah goes to check out his property. You remember, we saw that in chapter 32. Remember, he bought some property from, a relative of his. So now there was a little reprieve from war, so he goes outside of the city and he goes and checks out the land, his property. But when he was in the gate of Benjamin, verse 13, a captain of the guard who was there, whose name was Irijah, the son of Shelemiah, the son of Hananiah. This is the son of that false prophet that hated Jeremiah. He sees Jeremiah the prophet saying, "You're defecting to the Chaldeans. You've left the city. Why are you out here? You're defecting." Jeremiah said, "False. I'm not defecting." He was here to check out his property. But they did not listen to him. So Irijah seized Jeremiah and brought him to the princes. Therefore, the princes were angry with Jeremiah, and they struck him. They beat him. They didn't even listen to his side of the story, which is usually the case, right? You just hear, first thing you hear, it must be true, And they put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they made that the prison. When Jeremiah entered the dungeon and the cells, Jeremiah remained there many days. So he was really thrust into a dungeon. Then Zedekiah the king sent and took him out. And so the king says, "I want to talk to him." So he gets him out of there. And he asked him secretly, "Hey, I got to talk to you alone. Is there any word from the Lord?" I mean, this is the first thing he has been praying. And he does it. "Hey, you got a word from the Lord?" It's kind of weird, right? But he's hoping that maybe God has changed his mind. Maybe God's not going to punish it. Maybe he got a good word, Any word from the Lord, And I like Jeremiah says, "Yeah, there is. I got a word from the Lord. You shall be delivered in the hand of the king of Babylon." Yeah, I got a word here. It's the same one I've been telling you. Moreover, Jeremiah also said, "What offense have I committed against you and against your servants and against this people that you put me in prison? Why are you doing this? Where now are your prophets who prophesied to you, saying the king of Babylon will not come against you or against this land?" I mean, they besieged it. Well, they've destroyed all the surrounding cities, and they're going to be coming back. They're going to be knocking down the walls soon. "Therefore, please hear me now, O my Lord and King. Please let my petition be accepted before you, and do not make me return to the house of Jonathan the scribe, unless I die there. Don't put me back into the dungeon." Then Zedekiah the king commanded that they should commit Jeremiah to the court of the prison. So he was there. He was still unable to leave, but he was not in the dungeon. And they gave him a daily piece of bread from the baker's street until the bread of the city was gone. Eventually, they'd be choked out because now Babylonians are back. They're surrounding the walls. And Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So he would be here, but he was still, locked up in a sense. He couldn't leave. Now, chapter 38, you have three guys here, Shephatiah, Gedaliah, Jukal, and Pashur. There's four of them. They heard the words of Jeremiah that he had spoken to all the people, saying, "Thus says the Lord, he who remains in the city shall die by the sword, by famine, by pestilence. But he who goes over to the Chaldeans shall live. His life shall be a prize to him, and he shall live." In other words, they're going to come, surrender to them, submit to them. But these men didn't like the fact that Jeremiah was proclaiming destruction, saying, "A city shall surely be given into the hand of the king of Babylon's army, which they shall take it." And so the princes are reporting this to the king, verse 4, saying, "Please let this man be put to death. Kill this guy. He's weakening the hands of the men of the war who remain in the city, and the hands of the people, speaking such words to them. This man is not speaking the welfare of this people, but their harm." I mean, that sounds good maybe, but that's a lie. Actually, Jeremiah was the only one speaking for their good. You will live if you submit to God's punishment and now go into captivity. But if you stay here and you resist God's punishing hand, you will die. So what does the king do? King Zedekiah said, "Look, he's in your hand, for the king can do nothing against you." So they said, "We need to kill him." And King Zedekiah just rolls over. "Go ahead, do whatever you want." Now, he knows he's a prophet of God. He's inquired from him several times, but he doesn't want to, he wants to pacify his princes. He does nothing. He's kind of, you might even say he's a politician, right? Someone said this: a politician is an animal who can sit on the fence and keep both ears on the ground, right? That was Zedekiah. He was a man with big ears and no backbone, right? So he lets the leaders take Jeremiah. So what did they do? They took him and they cast him into the dungeon of Malchiah, the king's son, which was in the court of the prison. And they let Jeremiah down with ropes. And in the dungeon there was no water but mire. So Jeremiah sank in the mire. This is a cistern. We know what this is. This cistern, been over Israel, seen many cisterns, some large ones, large enough. They're bigger than this whole room and deep underground. They're just contain the natural containments of water. And usually they'll fill up with water that percolates from the mountains or is caught from the rains, and they would go and take water from there. But if there's a long period of time there's water, it just goes down. And of course there's settlement there, which is mud. It's mire, and it could be deep. It could be 10 feet deep, or it could be, 2 feet deep. Either way, Jeremiah is now in this mire, and he's lowered into it by these ropes. It wouldn't have taken long for him to die, to be honest. They weren't going to give him any food. He would starve to death, but probably before he starved to death, he would die of hypothermia. These caves or these cisterns that are in subterranean areas get to about 57 degrees. That's what they are. They're very cold. Like if you've been in a cave, how very cold they are. And the water is cold. And of course, you can die in water that's 73 degrees, 72 degrees. So it would probably be colder than that. He would have died of hypothermia. And by the way, Jeremiah is in his 60s now. He's not a young guy. And so God's faithful servant is dropped into a bunch of mud, left to die. Now, verse 7, though, Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs who was in the king's house, though, heard what had happened to Jeremiah. He's put in the dungeon. And when the king was sitting at the gate of Benjamin, he went out to the king's house and he spoke to him, saying, "My lord, the king, these men have done evil in all that they've done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they've cast into the dungeon. He's likely to die from hunger in the place where he's at. There's no more bread in the city. They're not going to feed him. He'll die." The king commanded him then, saying, "Take from here 30 men with you." So that's how far down it was and how they would need to lift this guy up and lift Jeremiah the prophet out of the dungeon before he dies. So thankfully, God, brought this man who appeals to the king, and he was released. He took the men from the house of the treasury, took old clothes, old rags, let them down by ropes, made on makeshift ropes in the dungeon where Jeremiah was. He says, "Please put these old clothes and rags under your armpits, under the ropes." Jeremiah did. And they pulled Jeremiah up with the ropes, lifted him out of the dungeon, and Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So again, he wasn't released to go free, but nonetheless, he wasn't down in a pit, right? Now, I was thinking, this is just big one giant pit. And, think about this. This is what God has done for us when he saves us. We were pretty much in a deep pit in the miry clay. And David, in one of the Psalms, uses that analogy. Isn't that interesting? In Psalm 40 and verse 2, he says, "God brought me up out of the horrible pit, out of the miry clay. He set my feet upon a rock. He has established my steps, and he put a new song in my heart." And I think that's exactly what Jesus Christ has done for all of us. I would say this, though, even though we're saved, there are times where we feel like it's the pits, though, right? Or we might even call them mud holes of life. We have those from time to time. But here's the thing. We never have to sink in utter despair because our God is faithful, isn't he? He is faithful. God always delivers us. And he delivered Jeremiah. Now, Zedekiah the king, verse 14, had Jeremiah the prophet brought to him a third time. "Hey, bring Jeremiah. I'd like to talk to him. And I'm going to ask him something." And he says, "Hide nothing from me, Jeremiah." Okay. Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, "If I declare it to you, will you not surely put me to death? I mean, really, can I trust you? If I tell you the truth, you're just going to throw me back in the dungeon? And I give you advice, you're not going to listen to me." Zedekiah the king swore, No, I'm not. "As the Lord lives, who made our very souls, I will not put you to death, nor will I give you into the hand of these men before who sought your life." So Jeremiah said, thus says the Lord of hosts. Here's the truth, king. If you surely surrender to the king of Babylon's princes, then your soul shall live. The city shall not be burned with fire. You and your house will live. I've been telling you again and again, submit to God's punishment. Submit to Babylon. He's God's servant at this time for your chastening and the chastening of the people. If you do so, you'll be spared, and so will the city. But if you do not surrender to the king of Babylon's princes, then this city will be given in the hand of the Chaldeans. They're going to burn it with fire, and you're not going to escape from their hand. And Zedekiah said, but I'm afraid of the Jews who have defected to the Chaldeans, lest they deliver me into their hand and they abuse me. So some, of course, had already been taken captive years earlier. He says, and they don't like me, and I go over there, and they're going to take my life. Jeremiah says, they're not going to deliver you. God will take care of you. Please obey the voice of the Lord that I speak to you, so it will be well with you and your soul will live. So Zedekiah is just offering up lame excuses. And I found over the years, there's so many lame excuses offered when you're extending salvation to someone, the free gift of eternal life. Your life is miserable right now. Don't you say, yeah, I know, I wish. And you're saying, well, then you just need to surrender to Jesus. Well, I don't know if I can do that, and if I do. And then all these stupid, lame excuses. And I know because I did those same dumb, lame excuses, right, before I was saved. But this is what he's doing. Oh, no, I can't surrender. I might die if I go there. So Jeremiah warns him again, verse 21. If you refuse to surrender, this is the word God has shown me. Behold, all the women who are left in the king of Judah's house shall be surrendered to the king of Babylon's princes. Those women will say, your close friends have set upon you and have prevailed against you. Your feet have sunk in the mire and they have turned away again. So they shall surrender all your wives and your children to the Chaldeans. You shall not escape from their hand, but shall be taken by the hand of king of Babylon, and you shall cause this city to be burned with fire. Now, Zedekiah makes no change at all. All he says is, hey, let no one know these words, and you shall not die. Just don't tell anybody you talk to me. Now, if the prince is here, I think the king was talking to Jeremiah, You say, declare to us, and they say, declare to us what you said to the king. Also tell us what the king said to you. Don't hide it from us, or we'll put you to death. Then you tell them, I presented my request before the king, and he would not make me return to Jonathan's house to die there. And that's true. He requested, please don't put me back in the dungeon. Then all the princes came, and they did ask Jeremiah. And he told them according to the words the king commanded. So they stopped speaking with him, for the conversation had not been heard. Now Jeremiah remained then in the court of the prison, that area. He was still not able to go, but right in that area, until the day Jerusalem was taken. And he was there when Jerusalem was taken. And that's what we have. One more chapter, chapter 39. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all of his army came against Jerusalem and besieged it. It is now surrounded. They are starving out the people. And in the 11th year of Zedekiah, 4th month, so exactly 16 months, that's all it took. And we know it's 586 BC, by the way. The city was penetrated. The war machines penetrate the walls. It's over. All the princes of the king of Babylon came and sat in the middle of the gate. So all their names are mentioned here, but they all enter into the city, They're going to take spoils and everything else. And when this is happening, Zedekiah, the king of Judah, and all the men of war saw them. They fled and went out by the city at night, by the way of the king's garden, by the gate between the two walls. And they went out by the way of the plain. So Zedekiah is trying to escape, trying to get out of there, But the Chaldean army pursued them, overtook them in the plains of Jericho. And when they had captured them, they brought him up to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He was at Riblah, not far from there, where they pronounced judgment on him. So God told them through Jeremiah, you'll see him face to face, and then you'll be taken away. And the first thing the king of Babylon did is he killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Imagine how horrible that. These are your kids, and he kills them. Just how horrible that is. And then the king of Babylon also killed the nobles of Judah. All of his princes, all of associates, killed them all. And then he put out Zedekiah's eyes, probably heated up a piece of iron and just bored his eyes out. And then he put his feet in bronze fetters and carried him off to Babylon. And the Chaldean burned the king's houses and the houses of all the people with fire and broke down the walls of Jerusalem, exactly how Jeremiah had prophesied. Now, The Nebuzaradan, that's the captain of the guard, carried away captive to Babylon the remnant of the people who remained in the city, and those who defected to them with the rest of the people who remained. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left in the land of Judah the poor people who had nothing and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. So those who submitted and defected, they were carried off to Babylon. The majority of the people died, of course, during the war and during the siege, and some poor were left in the land to take care of the fields. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard. He says, Jeremiah is under your care. Take him, look after him, and do him no harm, but do to him just as he says to you. That's quite interesting. So evidently, word had gotten back to Nebuchadnezzar that Jeremiah had been prophesying and telling the people of Judah to submit to him. He had gotten that word. Probably some people had been escaped. Maybe it was even in the first time he took captives. Either way. So he says, do as he says. And so Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent. And there are some mention of some other men with titles there. And he sent for all the king of Babylon's chief officers. And they sent someone to take Jeremiah from the court of the prison and committed him to Gedaliah. We'll be looking at him some more in the future, that he should take him home. So he dwelt among the people. And so in the midst of this devastating time, God is protecting Jeremiah. So God is faithful. He's gone through a lot, but God protects him. But not just Jeremiah. Notice this. Meanwhile, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah while he was shut up in the court of prison, saying, go and speak to Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian. That's the guy, remember, who put in a good word for him, who had him rescued from that pit. So he went to the king and he petitioned for his release. So God says to Jeremiah, you go to that guy and you say to him, thus says the Lord of hosts of Israel, behold, I will bring my words upon this city for adversity and will not for good, and they shall be performed in the day before you. But I will deliver you in that day, says the Lord. You shall not be given into the hand of men of whom you're afraid. For I will surely deliver you, and you shall not fall by the sword, but your life shall be as a prize to you, because you put your trust in me, says the Lord. So God rewarded that man for protecting his prophet and putting his trust in the Lord, and he was released and spared as well. Here what we see in chapter 39 is obviously the destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, the surrounding cities. It was a time of devastation. And the sad part of all this, as we've been seeing, is that all of this could have been avoided. God had repeatedly sent many prophets, not just Jeremiah, calling the people to repentance. For decades, Jeremiah has been calling them to repentance. And so as we come to this part in Israel's history, it's a sad time in their history. Actually, decades earlier, the 10 northern tribes had been taken captive by the Assyrian army for their idolatry, their waywardness. And now their sister, Judah, to the south, had followed in their tracks and now carried away to Babylon for 70 years. So a sad time in the life of Israel's history. But this is not where the story ends. And of course, Jeremiah himself is the one who prophesies, God will bring you back into the land. And it is Jeremiah who literally reads the scroll, the book of Jeremiah, in that captivity while he's there, realizing near the end of his life, the time is short and God's going to bring us back, which he did. So God is faithful. And so I would conclude by simply saying this: it's important for us to trust the Lord at all times. Knowing that no matter what, no matter how difficult it is, no matter what we're going through now, because we're all going through one trial or another, God is faithful. God is faithful. And when we place our hope in him, even though it looks so dire, so horrible, as it would for them at this point, being taken into captivity, God would bring them back because God is faithful. So I want to close with the words of the writer to the Hebrews. He reminds us of this. In Hebrews 10:23, he says, let us hold fast the confession of our hope. Our hope is in Christ. Our hope is in eternity. Our hope is in our omnipotent God. So he says, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering. We don't need to waver. Why? For he who promised is faithful. Isn't God faithful? Every single thing he promises, he fulfills. And that is to protect you and be with you. He said, behold, the work that I began in you, I will complete it. In the book of Jude, he says, I'm going to present you faultless before my presence with singing. God is faithful. Trust him. Trust him.
Thanks for tuning in to Larger Than Life with Pastor Ron Hint. Today, you've been listening to a teaching from the book of Jeremiah, found in the Old Testament of the Bible. If you've enjoyed this message from Pastor Ron's series called Captive, you can hear more today by going to ltlradio.org or just download our mobile app to have these types of messages with you wherever you go, whenever you want. This is a convenient way to keep God's Word on your mind and in your ears and on your heart. Larger Than Life is a ministry of Calvary Houston, and we're so glad you've joined us today to hear from the Bible. If you're in the Houston area, click on the Visit Calvary Houston link at ltlradio.org and find out how you can visit us in person this week for worship. Calvary Houston meets on Sundays at 9 and 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for a time of studying God's Word and singing His praises. Once again, that website is ltlradio.org. If you've thought of some questions or prayer requests you'd like to share with us, you're more than welcome to call us at 281-648-5800. Again, that number is 281-648-5800. With that, our time with you today has come to an end. Feel free to read on your own in the book of Jeremiah and then make plans to join us again right here on Larger Than Life.